Once, the baptism of Jesus Christ took place on the River Jordan in the Holy Land of Palestine by St. John the Forerunner. When God from the heavens said, "This is my only Son," and the Holy Spirit hovered above them in the form of a dove. This was theophany, epiphany, and from that moment Christianity begins. On the island of Patmos, St. John the theologian had a vision, a revelation about the end of the old and the beginning of the new world, a new heaven and a new earth. In that revelation, the Apocalypse, the last book of the New Testament, before the arrival of the heavenly Jerusalem, the second coming of Christ, parousia, is announced. The entire history and drama of Christianity, in which we also participate, takes place between these two manifestations acts, between theophany, epiphany, and the second coming of Christ, parousia. The head of St. John the Forerunner was cut off, his body burned, his head is today in Damascus, Syria, and his right forearm in the Cetinje Monastery. Christ performed miracles, was crucified on the cross, resurrected on the third day after burial, and his 12 apostles preached his teaching and spread Christianity throughout the universe. Christianity was born in the Holy Land of Palestine in the Middle East, spread to all continents, and found not by chance its most fertile soil in its original nonviolent form, precisely on the holy river Danube, in Pannonia. Already in ancient times, for Homer, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Danube region was the land of righteous and peaceful herdsmen and farmers who lived on milk and celebrated their winter guest Apollo, a land in which lived the most righteous and happiest among men, the nomads Abioi, Abik, who neither plowed nor sowed, yet had plenty of everything. They, as Danubians and great righteous people, were the only nation in the region of Pannonia, the Balkans, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East that did not participate in the Trojan War because they do not wish to fight on anyone's side. They lived like the blessed Hyperboreans, or like the men of the Golden Age when nature provided everything on its own. In Aeschylus' Prometheus Bound, they are called Gabioi, meaning those who are on wagons, Danubian nomads traveling in ox-drawn wagons in search of pasture, great guardians of justice. In Pannonia and the Balkans preached and baptized, converting people to Christianity as many as 7 apostles, St. James, St. Peter, St. Andrew the First Called, St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. Luke, and St. Mark the Evangelist. The Slavic apostles Cyril and Methodius and their disciples St. Clement and St. Naum translated the Holy Scripture into the Slavic language and published it in Old Slavonic writing. It is true that Cyril and Methodius brought Christianity in the 9th century, but mostly among the Serbs and Slavs of Central Europe. A number of Greek authors emphasize the fact that the population of Pannonia, the Danube region, and the Balkans has common origins, and anthropological and epigenetic studies of necropolises in Stari Ras, the Iron Gates region, Braničevo, and Vojvodina show that this population was Proto-Slavic. Historian of Christianity Karl Baus notes that by the end of the 3rd century, Christianity had become the dominant religion, especially in the provinces of Moesia and Pannonia, confirmed by the exceptionally large number of Christian martyrs executed for their faith. Historically, it has been proven that several thousand martyrs perished in these provinces. On the territories of the Balkan Peninsula, inhabited today by Serbs and other peoples, early Christian tradition preserved traces of several saints whose lives and cults are connected precisely to these regions. We mention only the most important and widespread: Saints Floris and Loris of Ulpiana, Saint Erasmus of Ohrid, Saints Hermilus and Stratonicus of Singadunum, Saint Irenaeus of Sirmium, as well as other less known but very significant early Christian saints of this land. Sirmium, during the persecutions of Diocletian and Maximian Herculius, was the place of martyrdom of the priest Montanus and his wife Maxima. More widespread was the cult of the Sirmian martyr Anastasia, whose veneration was widespread in the church both in the East and the West. Among the confessors of the Christian faith in Sirmium, Saint Sinorotus holds a significant place. Besides written tradition, the latest archaeological finds at the cemetery, the necropolis of Saint Sinorotus in ancient Sirmium, also testify about him. Sinorotus was martyred with 72 of his companions, whose names are unknown or not preserved, during the reign of Emperor Galerius. Very significant is the cult of the four-crowned martyrs, stonecutters. Their very name indicates they were martyrs crowned by their suffering in Pannonia in the time of Emperor Diocletian. By trade, they were stonecutters working in a quarry somewhere in Pannonia, probably on Mount Fruška Gora. Therefore, Fruška Gora is said to be sacred because it is soaked with the blood of the first martyrs. The role of Sirmium as a city and its inhabitants in organizing the church in Pannonia is described in detail. The large number of Christian basilicas in Sirmium confirms the historians' accounts of the strength of the church in Christianity. The first known Christian martyr from Singidunum was the deacon Fortunatus, who became a victim of the first edict of Diocletian against Christians in the early spring of 303. A martyr named Donatus from the same period is also mentioned. After the issuing of the Edict of Milan, in the years that followed, a conflict arose between the two rulers, Constantine and his co-ruler and son-in-law Licinius, under whose authority was the East, including Illyricum. In those years, Singidunum gave two martyrs for the Christian faith, the deacon Hermilus and the soldier Stratonicus, believed to have suffered in 320 or 315 AD. Historians of the early Christian church Danube and Meru, in their History of the First 6 Centuries of Christianity, write about numerous pilgrimages in the 4th century by believers who traveled to Sirmium to venerate and pray over the relics of the saints. At that time, Sirmium was an imperial capital. In that city in 357 AD, a holy episcopal council was held. They especially highlight Sremska Mitrovica, or Sirmium, to which the relics of Saint Demetrius of Mitrovica were brought very early and carefully preserved, and which, due to the Germanic invasions of 412-413 AD, were transferred to Thessaloniki. Saint Demetrius remained the protector of Sirmium. Between 453 and 458, the exact year unknown, the relics of Saint Anastasia were transferred from Sirmium to Constantinople. To Aquileia were transferred from Mitrovica the relics of Saint Jerome. The relics of Saint Quirinus are known to have been transferred to Rome from southern Pannonia. Such losses were not experienced again by the Christians of Srem until World War II, when Ustaše devastated the holy monasteries of Fruška Gora, plundered the reliquaries of the saints, threw the relics of Saint Stephen Šuplikac into a pigsty, and when the relics of Saint Prince Lazar and Tsar Uroš were barely saved and moved to Belgrade. The churches established by the apostles and their followers have since diverged dogmatically, first through Arianism and various heresies, then through the conflict of the two Romes, Constantinople and the Vatican, with the schism of 1054, dividing Christianity into Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism, then from the 16th century through the separation of Protestants, Calvinists, Baptists and others, and up to today through the creation of countless Christian sects. This schism, further fragmentation and division of Christianity in the 2nd and 3rd millennia, as well as the constant struggle of the three Romes, the Vatican, Constantinople, and Moscow, for primacy, exhausted Christianity and Christians through crusades and internal wars, destruction of cities, fortresses, bridges, treasures, pogroms, St. Bartholomew's Nights, conquests and genocides of people, women and children, all in the name of Christ, especially in the 20th century through World War I, World War II, the 1999 bombing of Serbia by 19 Christian NATO states, in the fratricidal war of Orthodox Christians in Ukraine, 2014-2025 in the conflict between NATO and the Russian Federation. The vain ethnocentrisms of certain Christian churches, believing that only they are the spiritual elect with a messianic role, deny other Christian churches and Christians the shared participation in the spiritual stewardship of the salvation of humanity in the world. What else must happen among Christians for them to stop arguing, hating, killing, and fighting for primacy? Who is closer to Jesus Christ? That is, to God. Or are all these transgressions committed for some earthly interests? Do we need a planetary atomic conflict, the Armageddon foretold in the Apocalypse? Who desires the destruction of humanity while wanting to appear as a Christian? If mutual conflicts and exterminations do not cease, Christianity will disappear from the face of the earth long before the second coming of Christ. Can the unification of all Christian churches and all Christians ever occur? Previous Christian globalisms, papal ecumenism of union or Protestant ecumenism of equality, have not succeeded in bringing the desired fruits of peace, goodwill, and Christian love. Our view is that the unification of the Christian world can come only after the meeting and reconciliation of the three main Christian centers, the Vatican, Moscow, and Constantinople, as well as other Protestant centers in Europe and America. Such Christian reconciliation through fraternal reconciliation of Christian churches, monarchs, knightly orders, Christian states and peoples, within dogmatic and cultural differences is proposed and offered by architect Vojislav Davić through the project of the Center of All Christian Encounter and Reconciliation, St. John the Baptist, located in Serbia, in Srem. By realizing Davić's idea, Serbia would, for the first time in its history, be placed in a position to become a meeting place of Christian leaders, churches, monarchs, statesmen, and peoples, a kind of ecumenical peacemaking center of the Christian world. This is a rare opportunity offered to Serbian religious, political, dynastic, spiritual, cultural, economic, and architectural elites to realize this project so that the Serbs, the Serbian Orthodox Church, and the state of Serbia become Christian hosts of peace, initiators of a new era of the peacemaking globalization of Christianity. The Serbian Orthodox Church, primarily due to its medial geostrategic position, although small, could offer the great older, larger, and more significant churches and Christian centers, above all Moscow, the Vatican, and Constantinople, to meet and reconcile on the territory under the jurisdiction of the Serbian Orthodox Church. After making such an offer, it would be necessary to wait for the great, older, and more significant churches to either accept it, reject it, or decide among themselves on perhaps a more appropriate location than Serbia for the realization of this all-Christian peacemaking project. Citizens of Serbia are guaranteed freedom of religion, or, as Emperor Constantine wrote in the Edict of Milan, the right of man to follow and believe without disturbance. Thanks to Emperor Constantine, his successors and their deeds, Serbia is an organic part of the Europe that prides itself on its Christian heritage, freedom, and high cultural achievements. Thanks to tolerance toward all three monotheistic religions, Serbia is also an organic part of Eurasia. The project has so far received approval from several secretariats of AP Vojvodina, the Ministry of Religions, the Ministry of Capital Investments of the Republic of Serbia, and other economic and professional institutions and associations in the country, as well as the Roman Catholic theologian, Professor Hans Kung, President of the Pan-European Union, Dr. Otto von Habsburg, the Moscow Patriarchate, and the Congress of Serbs of Eurasia. The Orthodox Bishop of the Bačka Eparchy, Mr. Irinej, in his letter informed the architect Davić, with blessings and best wishes, that he had officially forwarded the project to the Holy Synod of the Serbian Orthodox Church. There is also interest from the Serbian diaspora to financially support the construction of this complex under certain conditions. The fate and realization of the project of the Center of All Christian Encounter and Reconciliation, St. John the Baptist, may, but need not, be connected with the fate of the hand of St. John the Baptist. Naturally, wherever this project is implemented, not only the hand, but also the head and the remaining relics of St. John the Baptist should be united, placed, and preserved within such an all-Christian complex. Although it would be most optimal for the project of the Center of All Christian Encounter and Reconciliation St. John the Baptist to be realized in the Pannonian Middle Danube region, on the medial territory between the three Romes, which is under the spiritual jurisdiction of the Serbian Orthodox Church, if it for any reason does not grant final blessing, although Serbian Patriarch Pavle in 2003 allowed the Minister of Religion, Professor Vojislav Milovanovic, that the ministry formally approved the implementation of this all-Christian project in the Diocese of Srem, it could also be implemented on some other territory under the spiritual jurisdiction of another Christian church. It was precisely the dogmatic differences among Christian churches and Christians that were once the reason, and sometimes the cause, in the past millennium, of many wars, genocides, pogroms, forced unions, and other mutual actions that were anything but Christian. In the struggle for the realization of this third form of ecumenism, reconciliation within dogmatic differences, through the construction of a sacred complex, the center of all Christian encounter and reconciliation, St. John the Baptist, which would represent both symbolic and actual coexistence of all Christians, Christian churches, royal families, and knightly orders, all are invited and welcome. Essentially, and in terms of significance for the entire Christian universe, which would be attained through the meeting and reconciliation of the Vatican, Moscow, Constantinople, and other Protestant Christian centers, as well as all Christian royal families, the project of the Center of All Christian Encounter and Reconciliation St. John the Baptist would be not only possible, but desirable to be realized as soon as possible in some medial, geo-ecclesiological, or geomonarchical territory, whether in Serbia or Montenegro or elsewhere, with or without the hand of St. John the Baptist, which is kept in the Setnia Monastery. That medial reconciling earthly territory will reveal itself by God's providence, where the church, state, king, president, and political elites are ethically more mature, stable, and responsible, and decide to support this project and advocate for it among other churches, royal families, states, and knightly orders. The present or future king, your queen, emperor, empress, president, and Christian church that would support the realization of this soteriological reconciling project in the eschatological drama of modern apostate civilization could become the catechon, the one who restrains, that is, the obstacle to the coming of the son of perdition, the Antichrist. One thing is certain, this peacemaking all-Christian project of architect David surpasses the significance of any individual, Christian church, royal house, or knightly order, and the significance of any single state. By its realization, wherever church, state, and royal family decide that building this sacred complex gives a new chance to Christianity and Christians, and thus to humanity, a new spiritual era of the peacemaking globalization of Christianity will open. The financial structure of this grand universal project, crucial for the further survival of both Christianity and humanity, should in any case represent the smallest obstacle to its realization. In these crisis-filled, revolutionary, pre-apocalyptic, pandemic, transhumanist, scientific techno-info media times of constant divisions and implanted fears, from east and west, from visible and invisible enemies, and even from one's neighbors, this film draws our attention to the fact that Christianity could become in the third millennium a key factor of stability and balance in a divided world, to become an example to other monotheistic religions, divided and conflicted Muslims, Sunnis and Shiites, Jews, Sephardim, Ashkenazim, and Khazars. Christianity must first stabilize and reconcile with itself within existing dogmatic differences. If we Christians do not build life in true freedom and brotherhood of people and nations, then the Antichrist will do so in an evil and destructive way. The realization of this project, regardless of when and where, carries consequences of biblical proportions. Everything else we leave to God. The creation of this all-Christian project began in 1991 during the author's spring Easter pilgrimage to the Holy Land of Palestine. The creation of the film's synopsis was inspired by the meeting of the Patriarch of Moscow and all Rus, Kirill, and the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, Francis, in February 2016 in Cuba.